Hey everyone, let's jump right into this explainer and explore the really dramatic evolution of Roman power. We're going to unpack a thousand-year saga of just absolute political whiplash. We'll go from Rome's mythical founding all the way to its ultimate collapse, really zeroing in on those intense internal struggles and the constantly shifting role of leadership that defined one of history's greatest civilizations.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it, right? And this profound irony is going to be the central thread of our whole journey today. How does a culture so fiercely dedicated to shared power and institutional governance eventually just surrender everything to absolute individual military commanders?
So, here's our roadmap for making sense of this wild ride and exploring how solving one problem constantly seemed to create a brand new one. We'll cover the shift from kings to balanced consuls, how armies hijacked the Republic, how Augustus fixed the military, what life was like in the Golden Age, and finally, the rise of the Praetorians.
Let's start with part 1, kings to balanced consuls. We really need to understand Rome's deep-rooted trauma and their very first solution to the problem of tyranny.
You know, early Rome actually wasn't a republic or an empire at all. It was a kingdom. Our sources tell us they had 7 kings, but that 7th and final king was incredibly sinister and abusive. The trauma from his reign birthed the Roman Republic, which was founded on basically one uncompromising core principle: no more kings, ever. They had definitely learned their lesson.
Think about the sheer contrast between the Republic's super cautious, balanced solution and the absolute imperial system Rome eventually reverted to. Early Rome elected 2 consuls. They served at the exact same time for really short one-year terms, and they literally held veto power over each other to keep things perfectly in check. Now, fast forward and compare that to the later imperial emperors, one ruler reigning for life with absolute unchecked power. It is a staggering transformation.
Moving on to part 2, armies hijack the Republic. Because to survive in a seriously hostile ancient world, the Republic obviously needed armies, which leads to our next major complication.
Over time, military loyalty fundamentally shifted from the state to individual commanders. This effectively weaponized the army against the Republic itself. Leaders like Marius and Sulla set a really dangerous precedent. Soldiers started fighting for their general's reward, not for the glory of Rome. And this whole dynamic peaked when Julius Caesar used his fiercely loyal army from the conquest of Gaul to march directly on Rome, which totally paved the way for his heir, Augustus, to become the sole ruler.
Now, the political elites in the Senate, they were absolutely terrified of Caesar. They just saw a tyrant gobbling up power. But the average Roman citizen loved him because he actually improved their daily lives. He fixed the completely chaotic calendar, lowered taxes, canceled debts, and crucially, he regulated the grain supply so the poor wouldn't starve in the streets. To the everyday person, he wasn't just some distant commander. He was literally a lifeline.
And here is the ultimate tragic irony. By assassinating Caesar right in the middle of a Senate meeting to stop a tyrant, the Senate accidentally destroyed the exact republic they were trying to save. Because the public loved his reforms so much, his murder sparked mass outrage and a horrific civil war. The so-called liberators completely failed, and Rome fell permanently into the hands of sole military dictators.
Which brings us to part 3, Augustus fixes the military. Enter Caesar's heir, Augustus, who realized that if he wanted to fix Rome, he had to fix the army once and for all. Augustus knew exactly why the Republic failed. The army had stopped belonging to the state. So he instituted these massive, systemic changes. He standardized 20-year enlistments, provided regular paychecks directly from the government, guaranteed retirement land, and he brilliantly separated governors who had large armies from the provinces that had massive wealth. Basically, he rewired the system so loyalty flowed upward to the state, not sideways to some rogue general.
150,000. That's the exact number of professional, permanently stationed Roman soldiers Augustus kept on the payroll to secure the borders rather than just pursuing endless, chaotic expansion. This huge professionalization of the military created something Rome desperately needed right then: predictability.
So, part 4, life in the Golden Age. How did this massive shift to a stabilized imperial structure actually affect the average person on the ground?
Well, life inside the empire suddenly offered an unprecedented level of predictability and state-sponsored security, especially when you compare it to the decentralized world outside. Inside the borders, you had paved roads, aqueducts, written laws, and real administrative shock absorption for disasters like famine and crime. Outside, sure, you might have lower taxes, but you had absolutely zero safety nets.
It was a brutal system in a lot of ways, for sure, but it provided this organized structure that millions of people desperately wanted access to.
But as we know, stability is often just an illusion. That brings us to part 5, the rise of the Praetorians, the protectors who literally became the masters.
Augustus originally created this elite bodyguard unit to keep the peace, but placing a heavily armed, highly trained military unit right next to the throne completely and permanently altered the balance of political power in the capital. These guards quickly figured out the ultimate cheat code: whoever controls the emperor controls Rome. Step by step, power just stopped flowing through traditional institutions like the Senate. Instead, it started flowing strictly through the soldiers who were physically closest to the throne. When Emperor Tiberius secluded himself on an island, the Guard controlled absolutely all access to him. Later, when they got tired of Emperor Caligula, they simply assassinated him. And then, that very same day, they found his uncle Claudius and just declared him the new emperor. The protectors had officially become the ultimate political kingmakers. And honestly, nothing encapsulates this total institutional collapse better than this genuinely shocking event in 193 AD, where the throne was literally auctioned off like a piece of used furniture. Legitimacy didn't matter anymore. Tradition didn't matter. Public consensus was totally irrelevant. If you had the sheer wealth to buy the loyalty of the soldiers standing in the palace, congratulations, you ruled the Roman Empire.
To wrap up our explainer today, I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. Rome started out by expelling kings to build a carefully balanced republic, but the very armies they used to conquer the world eventually turned around and conquered them from within. Rome's absolute greatest strength ended up dismantling its own institutions. It really makes you wonder, can any society that relies so heavily on military might ever truly keep it under control?